Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I'm Marcus Barr, and for this month's hero study, I have another awesome guest that I'm so looking forward to introducing you to. And I have with me Brad Onishi. He is the co-host of the Straight White American Jesus podcast that I believe I have mentioned listening to on this podcast. He is the author of Preparing for War and just an all-around great guy. I'm so thrilled to have him here. So Brad, welcome.
It's great to be here and not sure about great guy and all that stuff, but glad I've made you think that at least, and just really thrilled for the invitation. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I can say from my perspective, you've been a great guy, so you haven't done anything to mar that for me. As you're shaking your head, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
if you only knew. Well, I mean, where the purpose of this podcast is to just explore what it is to be the heroes of our own stories. And one of the things that comes up a lot is we're flawed, we make mistakes.
Yeah.
I have been open about my history and some of the foibles I've made, the shame that I've carried and everything. So I know there's plenty in your past as well that it's like, oh man, I really wish I didn't do that, but that's also just a part of our story.
It is. There's a lot. It's interesting to think about this question and this topic because there's a whole bundle, right? I converted to a very conservative form of Christianity when I was 14, became highly involved in that church and in that culture, became a minister by the time I was 20, and got married to my high school sweetheart when I was 20. So I made a lot of big decisions at a really young age, which is ripe for regret and shame and carrying a lot of like what ifs. So that's one. The other one is, I'm dyspraxic and ADHD, and I think that also means that on a daily basis, I have to always remind myself to like forgive myself for the mistakes I make, the ways that my brain works that aren't normal per se, quote unquote, in a world where I just feel frustrated and limited all the time by that stuff. And I have two little kids, and so there's so many like things to do every day, like get a 2-year-old shoes on their feet that seem easy and are not. So all that to say, I feel like for me, there's stuff to talk about like deep in my past about shame. There's also an ongoing battle every day to not be ashamed of who I am and the brain and the body that I have.
Yeah. Oh, I totally get that. And I feel like that's something that a lot of us struggle with. So I'm I get the feeling that's probably going to come up as we talk about some of these questions here. Before I get into the questions that I sent to you, I do have one really pressing one that I am just abundantly curious of because I hear the topics that you discuss on Straight White American Jesus. I know the things that you're reading, the news that you're taking in. How do you handle all of that and yet not find yourself going down into a depressive spiral?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I'll be real. Thanks for asking that question. Because just what I do on a weekly basis is we do our podcast 3 times a week, and on Fridays we do a weekly roundup. That means I read all the news from that week, and my co-host and I really break it down from the angle of religion and politics and theology and Christian nationalism. So as you say, I'm just in it all the time. There's no taking time off from the news or from the bad news and the stuff that's happening. I'll admit that since the election, my mental health has been something I've paid a lot of attention to because for the first time, I've really noticed that this work has taken a toll on me and my mental health. So I've had to find ways to shut it off. I've had to find ways um, to be present with the people that I love the most, who are and who need me the most, without feeling like I need to go attend to the news or breaking stories or whatever. When it's time to be with them, I'm with them. And The blessing and the curse of having little, I mean, having little kids is the best, and it's also the most tiring, but they just need so much of me that I've tried to tell myself, like, look, when you're with them after work, after school, you need to be with them. No looking at the phone, no trying to keep up on what's breaking on Blue Sky or on, wherever. And that helps. I also think, and this is something that I'm sure you and others face, and I'm curious how this feels for you, is I have to tell myself that when I'm done with what I'm doing that day, a podcast episode, writing my book, working on various things, that's enough. That I can't do everything, I can't do all the things, and I have to accept that what I've done for that day is what I've done. And I'm going to rest. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to not pay attention for a couple hours. I'm going to not pay attention until the next day. I'm going to not think that I need to do more or feel like I didn't do enough, for whatever happened this moment. And that's a discipline that's not easy, but it's one that helps too. So I think those are some of the like minor things I've done. I'm sure there's other people and yourself who also have techniques and strategies for that because it's just not easy.
Yeah, it's really not easy. And I do want to celebrate with you that as you have been recognizing, especially since the results of the last election, just how much of an impact all of this has had on your mental health. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't take the time to recognize that. And it's like, I'm just going to power through, need to keep doing X, Y, and Z, and they're not resting or anything like that. So I just want to celebrate with you, Brad, that you recognize that and you are giving your best to the people that it matters the most to.
Well, I appreciate that, and that means a lot. And I think we all just have to kind of find ways to be um, the best we can in the various roles we have, right? And that's like, sometimes you go to bed feeling like I did what I was supposed to do there, but I didn't do what I was supposed to do for that person, or vice versa. And that's a constant battle of trying to find that sense of balance, right? And that sense of responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Brad. So we'll start with my first question here, and that is, would you give us a brief snapshot of important moments in your life?
Oh man. So there's a lot, but I got invited to church when I was in eighth grade, and I thought it would be a good way to see, my friends from school on a Wednesday night at Bible study, and that ended up with me converting to, as I just mentioned, a mega church evangelical kind of faith. And I'm somebody who I didn't know at the time, and I didn't understand this at the time, but all of the various parts of who I am, my body, my brain, the way my nervous system works, um, I was really disposed to take that faith very seriously, and I mean the utmost degree. I led a Bible study at my high school lunchtime. I walked around and asked my fellow classmates if they believed in Jesus and if they were going to go to heaven. Um, I was in ministry by the time I was 18, and then by 20, I was a full-time minister. So, those moments from age 14 to getting invited to church to age 20 when I was offered the full-time position to be a youth minister, and then also at age 20 to say I do when I got married, was those were huge moments that really just shaped my life. Another one was at age 24 when I left, and between the ages of 20 and 24, I was ministering to students 50 hours a week. I was in full-time college and then seminary, and then I was also a young person who was trying to be married, which was a whole adventure. Um, I became slowly disillusioned with that worldview and that subculture. The morality, the ethics, the politics started to fall apart for me. And so I decided I wanted to go to graduate school to kind of figure out what I thought about all these big questions. And I ended up going to graduate school all the way over in England. And that was probably the most decisive moment since then, because all the way 6,000 miles from home in Southern California, I was able to forge a new identity and a new sense of who I was, a new understanding of faith. And I'm not sure if I would have been able to do that if I had been close to home. I was totally removed. And so that decision to go all the way over to England to study with people that I was told were the wrong kinds of Christians or the wrong kinds of humans or bad people, um, that set me on the course I am today, 20 years later, doing all the things I do. And so, yeah, I think those moments from 14 to 20 to 24 really are the big ones. I mean, there's a whole set of others, but I'll start there.
Yeah. And it's interesting having these kind of conversations because I did not join a church when I was a teenager. I was born into
Yeah.
this
Yep.
it was a Methodist Methodist church. And I was one of those kids that Sunday mornings, especially as I started getting older, Sunday mornings, I would wake up before my parents did, and I would constantly be lying there and I'm like, okay, I don't hear them getting up. Does that mean we're not going to church? I really hope they don't get up. I really don't want to go to church right now. And then as soon as they would get up, I'd be like, oh man, okay, fine. I guess we're going. And it's there was something where it was more like an obligation, and
Yeah.
to me it was a snooze fest.
Yeah.
But as I became a teenager, I started getting more and more involved. And then it wasn't until my 30s that I started recognizing that things were not exactly as they seemed. Once you got past the veneer, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, no, it's actually kind of rotten below here. And that was when my wife and I started our deconstruction. She started before I did, actually. And yeah, it's like, hearing these stories, I never was that kid who could like go just confront my classmates and be like, have you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior? And some of that might have been because I I'm an empath and I didn't know that back then. And
Mm.
so just doing that kind of stuff was terribly uncomfortable for me
Sure. Sure.
because I could see the little micro expressions and changes on their faces and everything. And it's so interesting, especially as I've gotten into this space of hearing these different stories. And with the Christian tradition, we're often pushed to get married and start families at a very young age. And
Yeah.
I mean, science has proven this thing up here doesn't fully develop until you're 26.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, we're making all the best decisions when we're in our early 20s.
Yeah.
And yeah, just I hearing that again, that language that you're using about you were with the wrong kind of Christians and everything like
Yeah.
that. Like
Yep.
even among Christians, you can't even have a cohesive narrative of, who's in the right, who's in the wrong and everything. And that sounds like a pretty incredible experience, that time that you were going to graduate school in England.
It was, I think for me, it was one of those situations where from the age of 14 to the age of 24, I was told that, the world was evil, that people who were not Christian were really participating in a world that was full of sin and Satan's influence and wickedness. And I was also told that there were Christians who said that they were people of faith, but were really wolves in sheep's clothing. And if you hung out with them too long, or you read the wrong books, or you read the wrong theology, they would infect your mind. And so, you know, when I mean that I can, I think there's like I've talked to so many people about this where I was a convert and you're a cradle kind of Christian. And I think there's like such different experiences there, and then there's also similar ones, right? We both were at church a lot. We both were, in that culture, the singing, the praying, the Bible reading, the ways people speak, and so on. I think for me, what happened is my entire identity from age 14 to 24 was wrapped up in the church. I didn't have friends outside the church. I didn't have a culture outside the church. I didn't have a social life. My whole professional aspiration was tied into being a minister. I had made no preparations for any other kind of career. Was I going to go be a teacher, or was I going to go be an accountant? No, I was going to be in ministry. I'm 24. That's the only thing I've ever done. And when I moved to England, it was the first time I'd really left home. And it was the first time in my adult life since I was 14 that my social uh, relationships, my everyday interactions were with people from different worldviews than me. People who were Christians from Korea, who brought a whole different viewpoint than the American Christianity I had been brought up in. I met gay Christians who I was told could not exist. And they were awesome. And they became my friends. And we talked over coffee and beer and just had like the best kind of dialogue about life's ultimate questions. I just basically had my world explode into this mosaic of difference and diversity. And it was the most wonderful, gratifying, freeing experience I could have. I drank my first beer. I smoked my first cigarette. All of that. So that was big, and I'm sure there's people out there who've had tremendous changes in their lives who know what that feels like, where you have no idea who you are, which is so difficult and so excruciating. You feel every piece of your identity start to crumble, and in the same time, it's exhilarating because you're like, oh, maybe I can finally be who I think I want to be, um, and do that in a way that is going to help me create a new sense of self. So I look back at that period as like so scary and so hard and so wonderful and so freeing at the same time. And I think that's kind of how those things go.
Yeah, and there's also a lot to be said from your story here about these incredibly insular communities that are created through these churches or these denominations that you went away from home for the first time and had this incredible experience and you mentioned it as it just shattered this whole worldview. And I have heard that from people who have gone on missions before, whether we're talking, like modern Protestant denominations to like Mormonism and these people when they go on missions and when they go like somewhere outside of the US, it's like they come back and there is something that they can no longer fit within their box
Yeah.
because of that. And I'm noticing that like especially with a lot of the work that you're doing, the news that you're taking in and the people that you're following and these stories that you're hearing from like the very conservative right Christian nationalism and all of that, that I wonder how many of these people would be telling a very different story if they actually went away from home. If they actually, okay, well, they went away from home, but where did they go? A very conservative, insular, like
Yeah.
Christian college and that kind of stuff. But once, like, I have heard, where did I hear this recently? That once your eyes have been open to the realities of the world around you, it's impossible to close them again and go back.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the strategy is like, we don't want you to go far from home, meaning we don't want you to go to a public university or a non-Christian college. We don't want you to watch news that is outside of what we consider our bubble. We don't want you to have friendships with people who are different. I mean, the strategy is for you to stay home, quote unquote, in every sense. The media you take in, the people that you know, the education that you get. And if we can keep you there, then you're not going to have the kind of experience you're talking about and that so many folks have had. And if you do have that experience, there's a very good chance you're going to come back home and have very different eyes and very different understanding of what is going on there. And I think that's always been true for me. I grew up in real right near Anaheim, California, so like I could see the Disneyland fireworks growing up. And to this day, when I go back to that region, it's really hard for me to separate the place from all those experiences. It's not been a place where I've been like, oh, maybe I'll just move back there someday. I've always had this intense, complex relationship with the place where I grew up because it is now the place where I experienced all those things and I took in that worldview and I had so much pain and trauma. um, from all of that. And so, yeah, I did leave home, and it's kind of true. Once, it's hard to go home again, right? Because when you do, you have a different set of eyes, and it changes. And so, um, now I personally, I think it's a good thing. I think it's good for us to grow, to
Oh yeah,
optimize, to
absolutely.
actualize, to become people who have different relationships, a different understanding of how the world works. To not be afraid of that, to not think of that as like a menace. Doesn't mean that you have to, everybody needs to leave where they live or where they grew up and go thousands of miles away or something. It just means those things are some of the, in my view, the best parts of being a human being. Being a human being is so painful. Some of the best parts are like meeting people from different cultures, encountering things you never knew and seeing how they work, seeing a culture that does something you do every day differently and going, oh, wow, never thought about how that might do that. Just getting to see a world that is full of, wondrous things and amazing people. I don't know. That's some of the best part of being alive, I think. But for some folks, it's the scariest.
Yeah, and I want to hold both of those at the same time because I got a bachelor's degree at a public university here in it was actually in Central Washington. And when I think back to my experiences at the university, the best experiences were when I was just so engaged with the international population there because the university had a rather large English as a second language program. And so I interacted with people from the Middle East. I had a friend from Mongolia. There were a couple from Thailand, from China, from Japan. I mean, just kind of all over the place. And I even had this whereas he was from Saudi Arabia and, full on devoted Muslim. And the first time he met me, he was talking to one of his professors and was like, how do I tell that guy over there that I want him to be my brother? It's like, wow, that was incredible. And I wouldn't have had that if I just stayed within this insular community and culture that I was a part of.
Yeah, those kinds of experiences. I've had those experiences. I I lived in the UK and got to meet so many folks from not only the UK, of course, but from all over the world. And then I actually spent a year living. This is all going to sound very weird, but I spent a year living in a monastery in France, um, which again was this whole exercise in meeting people that you never thought you'd meet. And spent a lot of those years traveling around. And my wife actually lived in Egypt for a while, and also Amman, Jordan, and so that meant going to visit her there and see her there, and all of that to say, like the experiences you just talked about. I think there's something about being a human being and this experience of hospitality, of welcoming and being welcomed, that is just so marvelous and underrated, and it's a value of mine that I just think I hope I can pass on to my kids and anyone else around me because, you know, when you have somebody from Saudi Arabia who wants to be your brother, the bond you just made is, I don't know, that's just pretty special.
Yeah, it really is. And it wasn't until after I graduated that I learned I was doing this assignment where I had to go through every letter in the alphabet and find a word that described me. And then I came up to X and I'm like, what the hell am I going to find in X? But I ended up finding xenophile. And I'm like, oh
Ah,
yeah, that is me. And so, and I wouldn't have known that had it not been for some of these experiences. So, oh,
yeah,
I love it.
it's cool.
So my next question for you, Brad, is what is something in your life that you have overcome?
Oh, good question. I think that um, one of the things that I like to talk about that I think is important for straight cis men to talk about, and I'm a straight cis man, is to say, the sense of masculinity I grew up with. I grew up in a Christian culture and in a part of the country where to be a man was to be somebody who was tough and aggressive and um, action oriented and the head of the household, the head of the church, the head of all this stuff. And that was hard for me. It was confusing. I'm by nature kind of I'm somebody who likes to lead and to inspire, but I'm also somebody who's often thoughtful and would rather hang in the background, read a book, think about things, take a walk, go on a hike, ponder, reflect. Um, I don't feel a need to be the like decision maker and the kind of something all the time. So what I'm driving at here is I think for me in my 20s, I felt like I wasn't a real man. I was not a real man because I didn't fit into what I thought masculinity was supposed to be. I'm also dyspraxic, which means, and I won't go into the whole explanation of that, but it's just um, it's a kind of way that your brain processes. It's in conjunction with your nervous system, and so the long story short is I am really, really bad at uh, doing things with my hands. So dyspraxia just means things that are simple for others are not for you. So like I couldn't tie my shoes for a long time when I was a kid. Other kids could tie their shoes when they were in kindergarten or something, and it was like third grade for me. I couldn't tie a tie until I was like 30 years old, right? Just couldn't do it. Just can't, and people are always like, oh, if you just tried harder and let me show you, you could do that. And it's like, I actually have tried a lot, and I can't. Um, so there's no way I was going to be the kind of man who was like fixing cars or carburetors or changing the oil, or I built a shed in the backyard, or I totally uh, did this, that, and the other on the weekend to like DIY my house or whatever. But all the men around me were, and they were like, well, unless you do these things, you're just, what are you? You're not a man, you're something else. Um, I'm also Asian American. My father's Japanese American, my mom is white, and there's a persistent um, image of Asian men in this country um, as not manly, right? As not big and tough and whatever. There's just a lot of stereotypes about Asian men. So I think in my 20s, I put all those things together, and I was like, well, I don't know who I am when it comes to masculinity. And I think what I've overcome is this sense that I need to perform any of those things in order to be who I am, right? That to be who I am is someone who has the body and the brain that he does, and there's strengths to that. I can do the kinds of things I do on my podcast and in my writing because of that body and brain. And there's things that are just not easy for me or possible. And that doesn't mean anything about um, some kind of essentialist gender performance or gender um, characteristics. It doesn't mean that uh, I am not who I'm supposed to be. And I also think it just has helped me overcome a really rigid and retrograde and harmful understanding of masculinity and femininity and gender kind of in general. That there are ways that we can talk to, especially younger men and boys, about being masculine that don't involve aggression and savagery and violence and asking other people to submit to you. We can talk about being people who are responsible and who show up for others, who keep our word, who are hardworking and attentive to what other people need so that we can be a help to them in our families or in our relationships. People who admit when they're wrong or don't know, people who are keyed into others' emotions and their needs. There's just ways I think that we can articulate masculinity that doesn't have to be straight out of a kind of retrograde playbook. And so I think I've overcome a lot of those conceptions of myself, and it's an ongoing process, but it's one that I'm happy to engage in and really excited to kind of have a chance to undertake.
Yeah, and I was sending a virtual hug to you as you were describing the just these terrible messages about masculinity that you were receiving because Man, I receive those too. Now, granted, I'm not Asian American, but I was also a bigger kid, and I was told that I had a body that football coaches drooled over. They wanted me on the front line. And I did play football for it was my seventh and my eighth grade year in middle school. And I just could not wrap my head around the notion of why we're trying to kill each other to move a piece of leather from one end of a field to another. What's the point of this? And then I also received messages that I was going to make some woman a good wife someday. I was going to be the good wife. And that has actually played out. I mean, you take a look at like this closet over here, that's not the original design or anything like that. My wife made that. She's the one who did all of that. And you know what? I fully support her in all of that. She's the one who has the vision. She's the one who wants the power tools and everything. Great. Let's do that. If you need something big moved or you've got like an awkward long cut or something like that, I will go out and I'll help with that. I'll help move things. I will help apply like additional torque and everything like that because that's just kind of how I'm built. But I'm not the stereotypical man, and it has been a journey to be okay with that, especially when all of the messages I was receiving was like, no, 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 that's not how you're supposed to be. So, oh man, my heart bled as you were describing that because it's like, oh man, that is a story that we need to stop propagating to everyone.
You know, it hurts women because you're teaching men to be these aggressive, violent, savage, you need to submit to me kind of men. But and it also hurts men because you internalize this sense of I'm not good enough, I'm not the right thing, I'm not the right person. You know, people are telling you these things about you're going to make someone a good wife. And I remember being at so I remember I'll tell you one story. I I was 22 probably, and my boss at the church, the kind of one of the lead pastors, gave me a tool for Christmas. It was some sort of like screwdriver multi-tool or something, and I had no idea what it was. And as soon as he gave it to me, my head was like, "Never going to use that." Doesn't look like a book, so I don't think I'll be picking that up. And I went home and I asked my wife. I was like, "Oh yeah, you know, so and so gave this to me. I don't know how to work it. I don't even know how you plug it in or whatever." And she was the one who was good at those things, as you described, right? Your partner. And she even told the pastor, like, "Oh yeah, Brad thought you plugged this in," and he thought that was so funny because here I am, I'm so stupid, I don't even know that you don't plug it in. It's just something that work. It's a analog tool. It's just a something you use to screw in nails or whatever. But that was a really good example of like every day hoping that no one was gonna kind of come at me for not doing man stuff, right? Like I don't want to do man stuff. I don't want to build, and by man stuff, it's not me thinking that only men can do that. It's like the things that men at church told me men do. The man stuff was packing the car and, like I said, fixing the car or tearing down the drywall or, playing football. And I just didn't want to do any of that. So it was so nice, going back to my story of like when I moved to England of thinking, oh, none of the men nor none of the women around here expect me to do this sort of performance of whatever version of masculinity that was. I can just be me. And actually, people like it when you read books and you can contribute to a conversation because you've read that book or you know that idea or you've kept up on that current event and you can that's actually the thing that's valuable and prized. And I was like, oh, that's like a different way to be a person in the world. I'm gonna like lean into this one, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And just you mentioned it twice now, the whole notion of, not like fixing cars or anything like that. I take the Jeff Foxworthy mentality about working on cars. If you see my legs sticking out from underneath a car, call 911 because something bad has happened. So I get that. So Brad, my next question is, who is someone who has helped you get where you are today?
Yeah, I love this question. It's really a thoughtful question, and I'll mention. So I part of the story I haven't told is that I got divorced when I was 24, and it was really an amicable kind of separation. I was living in England, going to graduate school, and my then wife and I had been together since we were 14, and we were away from this church that had really been our cocoon, and we had really not been outside of it for a long time. And she was a public high school teacher, a beloved high school basketball coach, and that was her dream, was like just to do that. And here we were in England, and we had these talks of like, well, let's go home, and I'll quit my graduate program, this and that. And what we landed on was like, that's not really the issue. The issue is we've been together since we were 14. We're just different now. You want to do this with your life, I want to do that. Your personality is this, your personality is that. Your interests are here, mine are there. You coming back to California or me staying in England is not going to change that. And so we just decided it was time, and that was really, really hard and not easy. Um, but from there, I went on this journey of like redefining myself, redefining my faith, redefining my everything. And you fast forward from there about 5 years, and I met my now partner, um, who I've been with for going on 15 years, and we have two kids together. We're doing life together, have been for a long time. But the thing about them is that they have helped me in this process of overcoming my understanding of masculinity. That they don't put on me the restrictions of what it means to be a man. And they love who I am as I am in my body and in my brain and myself in the world. And they constantly remind me that that is um, not just okay, but it's amazing. And to have a relationship like that with somebody who sees you for who you are and wants you to be who you are rather than to fit into some kind of mold, or is disappointed that you're not this because they thought they were marrying a man or they were marrying a whatever, fill in the blank. I think that feels really good, and I'm sure others have had that experience, and others have had different experiences. But I don't ever want to forget how much that's helped me become somebody who accepts and celebrates who he is, rather than kind of detests who he is and wishes that he was enough, and so on. So
Yeah, and I really just want to punctuate what you shared there on how healthy the relationship is with your current partner because you are accepted for who you are. You're not trying to be pushed into this narrow definition of what it is to be a man and be a husband. That's a solid relationship. So if that's not what you're experiencing, then I highly encourage you to do some reevaluating because you can't be changed. You can't change someone else.
yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think that's life is hard. It's hard for so many reasons, and I know that there are those who are facing challenges I'm not facing, and I think the older I get, the more I understand how middle age is something that involves a lot of changes for who you are, but it also means that your parents are aging. You have a generation behind you that needs you. Um, and I think you can forget that on a daily basis, just being in a place where who you are is considered great, not deficient, makes a huge difference in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And being middle-aged myself, that's something I've really just accepted like within the last couple of months and seeing these changes that you're talking about, it's like, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because where I am in life, where you are in life, very different from how it was when we were in our 20s or even in our
Yeah,
30s.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and our roles and the definitions of who we are and what's needed of us is going to change.
That's right.
That's
That's
just
right.
life.
Yeah. And you can fight that, but it doesn't help you or anyone else.
No, it doesn't. And in fact, when I think of that, it's likely just going to cause more stress and make you pop more antacids because I've been there.
I hear you. I hear you.
So this is one of my favorite questions. I love to ask this because I do talk a lot about self-care, and self-care is a big part of it is just doing things that you enjoy doing. So Brad, what is something that you enjoy doing that you just come to life whenever you do it?
Yeah, I love this question. And I just got to do this thing that I'm going to talk about, and it makes me really happy. So, I grew up, as I mentioned, in Southern California, and that meant growing up near the ocean. I fell in love with the ocean as a kid. My father's family's history goes back to Hawaii. So from Japan to Maui in like the 1890s. So my family's culture and lineage and history really has a significant story on the island of Maui. So the ocean is something I just love, and so I grew up surfing. And you as an adult, I moved around a lot: England, Tennessee, Virginia, New York, and that kind of goes away. And I moved back to California in 2019, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm old. I'm not sure if I can do this anymore, but I think it would be a good thing for my mental health." And it really is. And let me explain why. I know people think surfing is kind of this, I don't know what they think of surfing. It's sort of a cool dude thing to do, or like I don't know what it is. But here's why for me it is such a good thing. Number one, I am outside. There are no screens, there are no phones, and you're not able to access one. So when you're in the water, you can't be like, "Oh, I'm just going to check the phone." Nope, that's not a thing. So my brain wanders, my mind wanders. It becomes bored. It becomes distracted. It becomes something that is not worrying about checking anything else. That's number one. Number two, I'm outside. I'm in nature. And the older I get and the more I understand that whether it's a morning walk, whether it's a short hike, whether it's surfing for 2 hours, being outside is something that makes me it rejuvenates my mind and body. And that's not anything groundbreaking. I know everyone listening probably knows that already, but um, that's good. Number three is it's really good exercise without competition. So I grew up playing sports. You talk about playing football. I also played sports. Um, I don't feel like at this stage of life I want to like compete with other people very often. I don't want to try to win games, and I don't know what that sounds like. I don't know if that sounds ridiculous, but um,
No, 100%. I'm right there with you. I'm not a
yeah,
competitive person. I want to cooperate and have fun, tell good stories. I don't like competing.
yeah.
Some people would say that makes me a loser. All right, fine. I'll be a loser because I'm happy with what I'm doing.
Well, and I feel like in the past I have been a competitive person, and what I've come to realize is like something you probably already knew a long time ago, which was, well, what do I get if I win? Like I'm 44 years old and I go play basketball and I win. What I should be trying to do is like exercise and get my heart health going and hey, am I hanging out with my friends who play basketball? That's good. If that's true, then let's do that. If I'm just going there to like win, I'm 44. I'm not going to get better at basketball at this point. It's all downhill from here. The skills are not getting uh, better. They're getting worse, period. So I think when I go surfing, it's like I'm not there to beat anyone. I'm not there to like compete. I'm there to just like uh, be outside, exercise, be alone with my thoughts. And then yeah, it's exhilarating. It's exhilarating to do something in nature where you have to time your body so that you are in sync with the ocean in it for 10 or 20 or 30 seconds or a minute. It pushes you along towards the shore. Um, that's surfing in its most simple, barest description. And it's hard to explain how exhilarating it is when it happens. When you're in the right spot at the right time and you get a wave and you ride it for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 seconds, um, it's actually pretty overwhelming. And it reminds you of what fun feels like. And so I think I got to do that recently. I spent a couple of days on a retreat riding and getting to surf. And it's one of those things where the older I get, the worse I get at it and the more fun I have. And the better my body feels. Even though it's sore, my body feels great. So,
I love what you said there. The older you get, the worse you're getting at it, and the more fun you're having. Oh man, I'm gonna take that with me. If nothing else, there's plenty of stuff I want to take with me from this conversation, but that really strikes home of how, I've struggled with like perfectionism
Yeah,
and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like I just need to I need to do, and I need to do it poorly. Because that's the only way something's going to get better. That's the only way I can try new things. That's the only
yeah,
way I can find new things that I enjoy. I've never tried surfing because I've only been to California two or yeah, I think it's only like two times in my 41 years. And whenever we go to the ocean here in, much farther north from where you're at, no one's really surfing. The water's
yeah.
too damn cold.
Sure, 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 sure. No, and,
But
and yeah,
just hearing that you're not the only person I've heard describing just the joys of like paddling out to the waves and like talking with some other people, and you guys are all looking for like the ideal wave, and then as soon as that one comes up, it's like, oh yeah, let's go do that. And just the camaraderie and the sheer delight that comes from it. I can only imagine. But just hearing you share about the pure delight of it all, I don't need to understand it. I don't need to go out and surf in order to, experience this. Would it be something fun for me to try? Absolutely. If
yeah,
given the chance, I would probably be willing to give it a shot. But just seeing how much you come to life just as you were talking about that, it's like, yeah, I don't need anything more beyond that. It's like it's something you enjoy. So
yeah. Well, and I'm not here to spread the gospel of surfing. I'm here to say, whatever your brain and body are wired for, that will reset you and bring you to a place of rejuvenation. That's what's important, And I think for me, being in the water means I can't do life. I can't check the phone. I can't keep up on the news. I can't text people back. I can't check social media. I can't check email. I can't blah 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 blah. And my as a result, I'm at a place of peace. Like, okay,
yeah.
I can't do any of that. It's just not possible. So just quit trying, brain. And my brain's like, yep, I'm done. I'm not going to try. And I'm going to let my daydreams and my wandering and then I'm outside. And then, oh, like, I'm moving my body in a way that I'm not sitting in a chair in front of my computer. These all seem good. This all seems
Hmm.
positive at the right. And for others, it's going to be other things. Right? And so for me, it's not I don't care about the gospel of surfing.
Yeah.
It's the gospel of like, do the thing that helps your brain and your body um, feel good and rejuvenate you and affirm you and get you away from the screen and the news and the all the other stuff.
And that's one of the reasons why I like this question, because you're the first person I've interviewed where the answer to this was surfing.
Oh,
Um, so last week I interviewed Tori Williams Douglas.
yep, yep,
And in fact, when I was telling her that you were going to be, the next person for a hero study, she was like, "Oh yeah, okay, cool." She was talking about hiking, how that's one of
yeah,
her favorite things. I
yeah,
talked with some of my friends, and it's like, if you see behind me, it's video games, and I'm an avid movie watcher with like Star Wars and Star Trek, and where
yep,
my wife and I were we just got like series 9 of Doctor Who from
nice,
the relaunch that they had done. We checked out the DVDs from the library, and we're just kind of working through them,
yep,
and just we get such a wide perspective of things that can be so loving and full of self-care and everything just from having these conversations. So, yeah, I'm not saying that you're preaching the gospel of surfing or anything like that. I just love having this conversation because I get to see your guys' faces light up
yeah,
and
yeah.
see it's like, oh, this is something that is really like filling them up, and that's the value.
That's right. I agree completely. Yeah, that's awesome.
So my next question is, what is a hero to you?
Hmm. This is a great question. So I think a hero for me is someone who, I'm going to put this the right way. A hero is someone who exemplifies something that we should emulate and strive to be without being seduced into the idea that they are somehow different from anyone else, or worse, a demigod whose nature is just elevated from the rest of their kind. I think,
Ooh, I want to unpack that. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So I think that, we live in this culture now, internet culture, right? Where we all sort of look up to various people. Everybody stands someone. It could be all the subcultures we're part of. You mentioned video games. It could be movie stars. It could be people on YouTube creators. It could be professional athletes. It could be Taylor Swift. It could be Beyonce. It could be Chappell Roan, whatever. Uh, okay. And then, we live in internet culture. So then we learn about them and they disappoint us somehow. I don't know. Right. And everybody says, don't meet your heroes and, whatever. And sometimes, regardless of their flaws, we just ignore them because we need them to be something different. We need Taylor Swift to be a goddess. We need that professional athlete to be something that's just different from us. They can run faster, jump higher. Their muscles are bigger. And what we do when we make that move is we make them like demigods, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Beast, I don't know who it
Hmm.
is. And so you ignore their flaws, you ignore their humanity, you ignore their mortality. Like, this could be a rock star, this could be whatever. So I think the idea of a hero is really dangerous because what it leads to in its worst form is us revering somebody as so elevated that their humanity and their weakness and their mortality is overlooked. And they become something that can do no wrong. The worst form of this, of course, is Donald Trump and all the people who, no matter what
Hmm.
happens, he can do no wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. However, we do need people to look up to. We need people who inspire us. We need people who have virtue and integrity and morality in ways that we want to emulate. We need to look up to others. So I think a hero to me is somebody who has those traits that are worth emulating and revering, even if we can't live up to them, even if we can't be
Hmm.
them, but at the same time, never pretends that that makes them into something that is um, elevated or different from others. So another example I haven't talked about is like the tech lords who clearly, right, buy into their own yes men at their companies and they believe that they are gods, whether it's Elon Musk or someone else. They just think they're different than you. They think that they are better, smarter in a way that you are expendable. And they're looked up to and praised in a manner that they can sort of and they obviously have enough power and money that they can operate this way in the world. And so I think heroes are are difficult because a hero is not somebody who does no wrong. It is not somebody without weakness. It is not someone who is perfect. It is not somebody who has not failed or made a mistake. It is somebody who has something that's worth emulating and striving for, but is human nonetheless.
Yeah. And I am always very careful whenever I am doing like a hero study and I'm researching someone. I am always very careful to make sure and point out that these people make mistakes too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one of those things for me because I have had that experience where people will like I I was a part of this community that the sole focus of it was helping people overcome unwanted pornography use and what they described as sexual addiction. And I was the coach in this community for a long time. And whenever someone, because the whole addiction and relapse cycle that we oftentimes see, we God, Tori and I were just talking about this last week, how someone will like have 7 years of sobriety under their belt, and then they go and they have like one drink and they don't even get drunk. And oh, you know what? You failed. You're back down at
Yeah.
the
You blew
bottom.
it. You blew it. Yeah.
And it's that whole idolizing, as you're describing, these people become demigods, and then we put them up on this pedestal and we admire them, and it is so world and soul crushing when those pedestals come out from under them and they come crashing down, and we realize, oh, you know what? They were just humans to begin with. And I think of how in every good story there is a protagonist and an antagonist. And the only difference between them is that they are both hero, or the thing that's similar between them is they are both heroes in their own story, but they just happen to have goals that conflict with each other. And we can't necessarily say that like one is evil, one is good. You know, it's rarely ever that black and white, but having someone to look up to, as you're saying, that can inspire, that can help us to become better, to me, that's really what it is to have a hero.
Well, and it also reflects on, so if we are people who have heroes, it reflects on what we're trying to be. So instead of me trying to be a god or a demigod or a something, the goal is to say, hey, I want to be a person who has these virtues, who has this character. So this person over here does this. They've accomplished this. They have done this. They constantly emanate this virtue. I'm gonna try to learn from that. I'm gonna try to like
Yeah.
be inspired by that. I'm gonna try to say, oh, maybe I need to do something different. Maybe I need to change the way I'm living or change the way I'm thinking or change the way I'm approaching things. My goal is not to be a god. My goal
Yeah.
is not to be better than others, to be elevated over others, to think that I have somehow reached a status where I'm just superior. So, like when we have heroes who are not gods, we ourselves are reflecting that we're trying to become better, trying to be the best versions of ourselves in our own story, even though that doesn't mean being uh, a god in our story. It means being the hero of our own story,
Yeah.
and those two things are different.
Yeah, and I even shared this with my last interview, that one of my all-time favorite video game heroes is this character named Cecil Harvey from Final Fantasy IV. And in that story, he was betrayed by the same person no less than two times. That doesn't really seem like that's a very heroic thing to have the same person betray you. But that doesn't change the fact that there was examples of forgiveness, of reconciliation, and that, you know what, sometimes we do put our trust in the wrong people. And that's just a part of the journey, this crazy journey that we call life.
Yeah. Yeah. And our heroes need to be people, as you just say, or
Yes.
characters who fail. And and they may disappoint us, right? And I think part of that process is recognizing two things are true at once. That person should not have done that, right? They failed. They messed up. They made a bad decision. Um, so we should recognize that. If things need to change, they need to be taken out of position of leadership or okay. But it's also the reminder that like the goal was never we never viewed them as a person who didn't fail, and we ourselves are going to fail also, right? And it's not a matter of not failing, it's a matter of how do we become the right kind of people who fail or mess up or stumble um, the right way. And there's a difference there.
Yeah, and to me, a big difference is it's not a matter, like you're saying, of whether or not we stumble. It's what do we do when that
Yeah. Yeah,
happens?
exactly.
How we can learn so much. Like I've used this example. where when I was in high school, well, and even in middle school, like both of my brothers were like getting romantically involved with some schoolmates, classmates, and that kind of stuff. And I didn't. I was not willing to do that because I kept hearing how important it was to have good grades and everything. And I watched both of my brothers and saw what happened with the mistakes that they were making in the relationships, in school, in communication, and everything. Did it make me an overall better communicator and student and, you know, lover in the end? No. But I can imagine that I would have been worse had I not watched them. And so seeing these dynamics of, yeah, these people make mistakes and then when they fall down, what do they do to pick themselves up? That is something that can be so life-giving if we can only take the time to observe and to watch.
But I honestly think that you can, just as somebody who spends so much of his time in politics, you can chalk up the last 10 years of American life to the fact that we've elevated people to places of leadership and reverence whose reaction to their failure or their, and failure is a strong word, reaction to their, um, you know, it could be failure, it could be depravity, it could be something terrible, it could be a misstep. Okay, there's like degrees of this, but the reaction to anything from misstep to uh, tragic error is double down. Nope, you're wrong. You're lying. I don't think so. That's fake news. That's bad information. How dare you? You're the one who did that, not me. We have become a society where when you don't succeed, when you do make a wrong choice or do something that's awful, the response is to say, "Nope, it's not me, it's you." And I think that is, if you wanted to boil down the last 10 years of this country, that is a big part. That is a big theme in the story of this epic.
And I'm not going to disagree with you on that at all. And there really is, like, just talking about what is a hero, there really is something heroic about someone being able to admit that they've done something wrong and have the humility to be like, ooh, yeah, I really shouldn't have done that.
Hmm.
And say probably two of the hardest words that people, especially in modern American society, can say, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed completely.
All right. So, Brad, my next question is who is an influential hero in your life, whether we're talking someone fictional or non-fictional?
Yeah, this there's a couple here. So I'll go with somebody who's close to me. That's my dad. And my dad is tied up in the story we've talked about today. So, um, my dad is this guy who, when I was growing up, he was never the big shot dad, right? You around your town, he was never the guy who made the most money or drove a cool car. He didn't like show up in at our baseball games or in public or at the school events as like Mr. Cool guy or handsome, or I mean, he was just never any of those things. He was always just somebody who cared about other people. Um, he made friends wherever he went. If he saw you in the grocery store, if he was your friend for 30 years, he would always just treat you as like a human being. And I think when I was young, sometimes as somebody trying to find that identity as a young boy and a man in the world, I was like, how come my dad is not that person who is trying to be super successful in business or super show off or the aggressive guy at the sports game or something. And when it came to like family relationship stuff, he was somebody who did say, I'm sorry, or did say, I think I was wrong. And I think in my youth, I interpret some of that as weakness. And the older I've gotten in my late 20s, my 30s, my 40s, I've started to realize that um, there's tremendous character and strength in the way he lives his life. No matter who you are, He will look at you as a human being. You could be somebody who is, um, he just met. You could be somebody who is the waiter at the restaurant. You could be somebody who's the person drying the car at the car wash. You could be somebody um, from another country that, as we talked about earlier, that he never met. You're always just a human being with dignity and worth and value, and that's how I'm going to treat you, right? Um, I think additionally, it took me a long time to realize the fullness of my dad's story. So my dad was born on Maui in 1948, and his father, he only met once, and his father died when he was 6 of alcoholism. And his mother left him and his sister when he was 3 with their grandmother on Maui. And so he grew up on Maui, knowing that his mom was not around. She was elsewhere, but on a different island. And um, he didn't have shoes until he was about 8. His father had passed away. So here's a guy who grows up like, really in some ways abandoned by his parents, without a lot of traditional support at home. My great grandmother, his grandmother, didn't speak English, um, and Japanese was his first language at home. And he didn't have like a lot of structure and support when it came to family and all that stuff. If you fast forward, right, his whole goal when he got older was to be the best dad he could. He coached our soccer teams. He was part of our scouting groups. He took us on vacation. Even when my parents got divorced when I was 10, um, that was always his goal, right? I joke with people that when you're Japanese, you have rice every night for dinner. Doesn't matter what you eat. And sometimes like we'd have spaghetti and rice, and you invite your friend over when you're in 4th grade for dinner, and they're looking at you like, "Are we having rice and spaghetti?" I'd be like, "Yes, we are." Yeah, so that's normal for us. But that was my dad. We'd go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, and he'd buy chicken, and then we'd go home and eat that with rice, right? And that was him as a single dad doing his best. What's my point is like, here's a guy who didn't have a dad and whose mom abandoned him, who made it his mission to be the best dad possible. And even when I was younger and I didn't understand the fullness of his character, um, that's who he was. And now, as I'm a father and I'm somebody thinking about these things, I recognize that for him to be a hero was the small, everyday things he did, making lunches for 3 boys when he was trying to get to work and as a single father, the choices he made about money and time and how to spend it, the way he just would go out of his way to make sure that we knew he loved us, to always be proud of us, whatever we did in life, and the choices we made, to listen to our perspective when we brought home new ideas. When I came home as an 11-year-old and said, I'm going to be vegetarian now, and he was like, okay, sounds good. What does that mean? And I think, we're talking about heroes today, and I think I've always thought about this question that a lot of literary giants have asked and tried to solve, which is, can you be both a good man and a great man? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of people who we consider great, and they could be men, women, they could be anybody. They're great. And they're great because they sacrifice everything else for their greatness, right? Kobe Bryant sacrificed friendship and companionship and so many things to be the best at basketball, like just maniacal. And he's revered as a great basketball player and is still a hero to many. Was he a good man? I don't know, but I know that many people consider him a great man,
Hmm.
right? So many of the writers that we might revere, you know, and everybody has their favorite writers, their people they look up to. When you start investigating their lives, oftentimes they appear to be they're great literary figures and bad parents, siblings, friends, partners, lovers, all of right.
Yeah.
And so to be both a good man and a great man, to be both a good woman and a great woman, to be both a good person and a bad person, or I'm sorry, a good person and a great person, often feels like it's not possible. And the more I think about my dad, the more I think about the fact that if we had people in this world who's were determined to be good people, then we'd have a great world, right?
Yeah.
And so my dad is not a literary hero. He's not a business titan. He's not a notable figure around town. He's not the mayor, right? But I recognize in him somebody who somehow, without the example of good parents, of present parental structures, of um, anybody who showed him how to be any of that, decided that that's what he was going to be. And the impact on my life and my brothers, and by extension, the people that we love now, could be my partner, could be my kids, could be anyone else. A lot of that comes from the wellspring of like a lifetime of seeing someone closest to me teach me how to treat others, right? Um, so it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how accomplished you are, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter. You always treat people the same way. And the way that you are going to feel like your life is meaningful is always going to come through your relationships with people. And my dad always said that. And when you're young, you're like, yeah, but I want $20 million dollars, or I want to be famous, or I want to be something. And look, now I know as somebody who's 44, and I've had moments in my life where I've had very little money, very little like relationships. I don't want to compete anymore to have that stuff. What I want to do is spend as much time as I can with the people that are meaningful to me, doing meaningful things. Like we're thrown into this world with no choice and we have to leave, even though we may or may not want to. Why would I spend time on this tiny rock floating in space trying to be better than someone next to me at whatever game you told me I'm supposed to play? I want to go explore every corner of this universe I can, whether that is through travel or through hobbies, whether that's learning through books or other means, and doing that with people that share all of that affirmation and excitement and enthusiasm as me. Like I want to saturate myself in wonder rather than compete with a bunch of other sentient beings who were thrown into this place just like I was. Like we were all thrown into the Squid Game. Like what am I gonna do? Sit around here and try to like be better at the Squid Game than you? Then I'm just better at the Squid Game. Like I
Mhm.
might as well take in the bedazzlement of this painful condition I have. And I think that when I think about my dad, he never would put it that way. He's not the kind of guy that talked like this, but I think that's what he always tried to impart to me and to anyone else who was around him. And so I think that's a big influence for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I, the one thing that's coming to my mind, and this might make you cringe, but I'm going to say it anyways, is I can only imagine the world that we could be living in if we had more dads like yours.
Yeah, and you know, I think for me, there's always more of a temptation to try to be a great man.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying I've ever succeeded, and I'm not here to. What I'm saying is like I don't think my dad ever thought about that his life that way. I think my dad always thought about his life as like I want to be a good person to the people who meet. And every time I've been seduced by the idea of being great, to be a great writer, to be a great this, to be a great that, I feel like I've come back to him and been like, yeah, and then what? You know, then what? And I think for some people that may work. They want to sacrifice all the other things in order to be great at blank, and that's okay. And oftentimes they are the ones that we remember and we look up to. That's not going to change. But you're right. I think if we had more people like my dad, then we would have a world that was different. And we will, especially now, we'd have a world that was based less on likes and views and clicks. Um, and we'd actually have hopefully less loneliness and
Yeah,
more sense of being um, understood in the world.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Brad, I do want to respect your time, and therefore we're going to move on to the last question here.
Let's do it.
And that is, if there's anything that you want to share with our friend that you didn't get to say, what would you want to say to him?
You know, like um, this time we're living in is a really daily, moment by moment case study in how life is really painful, and it's painful right now for a lot of people. Um, it's painful for people who are um, being racially profiled and stopped and asked to show their documentation, for people who are having family members kidnapped by people in masks. It's difficult for anyone who's queer to feel like they have safety in this country. It's difficult for a lot of us in various ways. I
Yeah.
dare say all of us. Um, and I think for me, the thing I try to hold on to is like, you can't solve the pain of the human condition. And you can try, and you can do that through religion, which we talked about a little bit. You can do that through drugs. You can do that through something you think is going to solve you. But to be human is to be irresolvable. You're a question with no resolution and no solution. And if you accept that, then you'll be on a path that says the goal is not to solve myself or to solve the world, but the goal is to say, perhaps more than any other being on the planet, we have a capacity for meaning that comes through a lot of what we talked about. Comes through observation and exploration. It comes through community and togetherness. It comes through experimentation and um, diving into every last thing that we can think of in the panoply of the human species. Folks who are into video games and board games and old movies, all the way to people who are, um, you know, bungee jumping and taking on class 5 rapids, to folks who are doing everything and in between and far beyond. The sense of like wonder and being overwhelmed by this place and by the people here is why you hold on to what we do. Like, there's no escaping this time as like just awful. But unless we remember what it means to like feel joy, right? And to be overwhelmed by excitement, then there's no reason to keep fighting for a society we think is worth having, for democracy, for human rights, for equal representation, for people to be safe and secure, regardless of who they are. So that's what I want to say to everyone is like, that's why we keep going, is because it is possible as a human being to be overwhelmed by joy, to be saturated in wonder. And those times are really, really worth it. You know, the 15 seconds on the wave I talked about earlier is really worth it to me, as are the moments I can still spend with my dad, who's almost 80 years old, or the like very tiny moments in the morning with my kid when they give me a hug and say, let's make oatmeal together. Um, or the time I see a friend I haven't seen for 3 years and we just sit on a bench for 2 hours and talk about what's happened. Or the moment in the morning when the sun comes up and you're on your walk. And just for a brief instance, the beauty of this condition feels like weightless. Um, that's worth it. So we can overcome the curse of this condition with the blessing of it, but it's not easy, and it takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah, it really does. And I love how you described it as both a curse and a blessing, because that really is what it is to be human.
Yeah,
Is it is a blessing and it's a curse. And finding the balance and how we can be comfortable with the discomfort of the dissonance between those two.
yeah,
I honestly think that's where we're going to be thriving the most.
yeah, yeah. Agreed.
Well,
Agreed.
thanks so much for that, Brad.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thanks for introducing people to um, all these heroes' journeys. And just really, really thankful.
Yeah, and I'm so thankful that you came on here, shared some of your story, and offered these insights, because most of the people that I have communicated with have been individuals very similar to me. You know, middle class, white American. I have two friends who are queer and they had some very interesting stories to share. But hearing your perspective and like even Tori's perspective previously, I mean, you guys have taken these questions that I've been asking everyone and you have just flipped them around to look at them from different perspectives. And that has been so eye-opening and wonderful. So I can't thank you enough for being here. And I do want to say, keep up the good work, what you're
Thank
doing
you.
with Straight White American Jesus. If you do want to hear more from Brad, as we said, he is the co-host of the Straight White American Jesus podcast. And I'm hoping to get his co-host Dan Miller on here
Yep.
as well. If anyone wanted to follow your work, where could they do that?
Yeah, so we do Straight White American Jesus 3 times a week. You can find us at straightwhiteamericanjesus.com. I have a website, bradonishi.com. You can go there. I am most active on Blue Sky. So if you're a Blue Sky person, you'll find me there a lot. I'm occasionally on Instagram or TikTok, though far less. So yeah, those are some of the places. I have a book coming out next year called American Caesar, How Theocrats and Tech Lords Are Trying to Turn the United States into a Dictatorship. So pretty cheery stuff, very light reading, beach read, really. Uh, that's coming out in about a year, hopefully. So yeah, that's me.
And what can you give us the title of your first book or your
Yeah,
other book?
Preparing for War, The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next. So that's out, and I dare say pretty relevant for the moment we're living in.
Yeah, I tried to check that out, check out the ebook in my library, and I found out the hard way that what I had checked out was not your book. In fact, it was a like 40 to 60 page review of your book that
I've
some
seen
of
that. Yeah, I don't know who did that, but I have seen that thing. I don't know why. I'm mad at the library for even having that. I'm not gonna lie, but that's fine. Whatever.
Well, they might have like the physical copy. I just haven't looked into that yet,
Yeah.
but I was really hoping to have the ebook. But yes, absolutely get in touch with Brad. He's doing some awesome work out there. And if you do have any questions about anything that we are talking about here, feel free to send me an email. My email is questions.btcpod@gmail.com. Please give this podcast a review, like and subscribe, leave comments on YouTube, and we will see who's going to be either featured for the next hero study. But until next time, live strong for today.
Farewell, everyone.